We'll give it a couple moments, but I'll introduce our moderator. So our next panel is Consumer Healthcare Technology. I want to introduce Professor Debbie Lin. So Professor Lin is the current VP of Strategic Partnerships at Caris Life Sciences, a precision oncology company. Previously, she was at Boehringer Ingelheim as the Executive Director of Venture Investments, where she made investments in the digital healthcare space, as well as the consumer healthcare space. Professor Lin was a UCLA graduate of the Luskin School of Health Policy and has joined UCLA Anderson to teach a healthcare entrepreneurship class for our MBA students. All right, Professor Lin.
Can you hear me? Great. Well, this is going to be a tremendous panel. I think it's perfect setup from the last talk with Tombot. I'm curious regarding the use of artificial intelligence in your robot. And so I was stimulated by that. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing from the panelists. This is Consumer Health Technologies. We have James Mault, Jeff Chen, Michael Chapp, and Corinne Bain, who have joined us. And so I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your company. So go ahead.
Well, thank you. I'm Jim Mault. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called BioIntellisense. This is my fifth startup company. We could talk about that. I am a recovering cardiothoracic surgeon, used to do heart and lung transplants by day and by night. So I come from a pretty hardcore clinical background, and what we're doing obviously impacts that. I went to college and medical school at the University of Michigan. Welcome to the Big Ten to all of you. And yes, we did finally pull it off this year, so I had to make mention of that. Go Blue! That was yes, I know. Everybody knew Harbaugh was leaving. He's got to get that Super Bowl from his brother. BioIntellisense is really the culmination of about 2 decades of work, really recognizing that as a heart and transplant surgeon, when we sent people home from the hospital, it's 5 days after cutting your chest open, and a little pat on the back and the kick in the rear and a set of instructions for the family to keep track of. And that's pretty dicey. And in Denver, where I was doing heart transplants, those patients go home to North Dakota and South Dakota. And so it really became an obsession of how do you find out how to be able to take care of these people, hundreds of miles away. And remote patient monitoring was really the key here. And we'll talk about, we're really, whether you like it or not, that is in the hands of patients and consumers, all about the human factors and the usability and the battery life. But from our vantage point, there's a big difference between, FDA medical quality monitoring, where we're making life and death decisions, versus, fitness and wellness. So we'll talk about that.
Excellent, thank you. Dr. Chen, your company, you're co-founder and CEO of Radicle Science. Your company was named top 10 U.S. tech innovators. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your company and some about your background.
Sure. Speaking of my background, it's great to be back here. I'm a graduate of the MD MBA program here at UCLA. And I was actually, while I was still an MD MBA student, I went to the very first Vitals 10 plus years ago. Was anyone else here at that? I might be the only one. Holy cow. All right. So my company, Radicle Science, what we have done is we've created this new category of proof as a service, and making the generation of clinical proof as easy for a company as getting, subscribing to a SaaS platform online. And so we serve the wellness sector because they traditionally have not had access to clinical proof. Clinical trials are too expensive. They're built for pharma companies. But we've brought that cost down by about 100x. And it's through a combination of a technology platform, an army of volunteers all over the US, and a layer of AI intelligence that's able to actually run these double-blind randomized placebo-controlled trials the way that they're just automated, they're virtual, they're standardized. And so our vision is, with all these wellness products, you don't need a doctor's prescription. They're not generally expensive. Once you have that layer of proof, these become democratized medicines that anyone can access directly for themselves without having to interface with the healthcare system. What's fundamentally been missing is that layer of proof. And so that's kind of what we do. So it's really glad to be back here.
Thank you very much. I noticed that you have an Oura ring. So that brings us to our next guest, Michael Chapp. You have an engineering background. Love to hear a little bit more about that. And you've worked in business strategy as well as product development. Tell us about that. And or I still don't have one, so maybe I can be convinced after this.
Thank you. Actually, I'll start off a little bit about myself. So, non-traditional. I actually, when I was a kid, wanted to be a neurologist. Oh,
hope this works. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Thank you. So, starting with actually going back, when I was a kid, I actually wanted to be a neurosurgeon, and I am not today. One of the things that actually changed the trajectory of my life is I had a person in my life who actually brought up this interesting question to me at a young age, which was, do you want to make a local impact or a global impact? And hopefully I never need a neurosurgeon, but have a lot of respect for them, and they're just wonderful. But it really did change the way I was thinking about my life moving forward. So I actually shifted over to engineering, and I have mechanical and material science engineering degrees and started getting into the medical field. But I grew up in Michigan, and I went to the school down the street from the one over here, Michigan State. Growing up in Michigan, I actually joined the auto industry, as everybody does in Michigan. And what changed was I was actually walking into a room. So imagine a young version of me walking into a room, and I was like, I have a great idea. I want to put heart rate sensors in the steering wheels, and I want to put weight sensors in the seat. Back in 1999, everybody looked at me and said, you're crazy. We build trucks that take you from point A to point B. Stop talking this nonsense. It changed the way I started thinking. I immediately left, and I started looking at my life in a different way. Number one, I want to make a global impact. Two, I knew I wanted to do it in health. And so what I immediately started doing was looking at different parts of my life, of going out, and I started doing research in robotic surgery in Germany, all the way to working in R&D at Hewlett-Packard, to working in hospitality, which, crazily enough, actually influenced me heavily, coming from an engineering background. But I even went and started my own company, and had, like most startup entrepreneurs, you're grinding away, and I actually got to a point where I exited, thankfully, and I was really happy, but I also needed to take a sabbatical and recover. And that's actually when I discovered Oura. And how I did that was I was actually sitting in a movie theater with a friend watching Crazy Rich Asians, and he looked over to me and he said, hey, you should really check out this ring. And I was like, what is that? He's like, it's Oura. Have you heard of it? And I said, is it this company, this Finnish company? And 5 years earlier, I had heard about them off a Kickstarter. And they had this massive ring. The only way I could explain is it looked like a Super Bowl ring. And I was like, looking at the size of the team, I'm like, there's no way this little tiny team is going to be able to deliver on their grand vision. Well, fast forward 5 years, I'm sitting next to somebody who's showing me the Generation 2. I put it on. My life changed forevermore. This ring enables you to track all of your vitals, well, your heart rate variability, your temperature. We're able to, in a very simple form factor, extract so much health-related features from that. And it was the first wearable I've ever worn that actually changed behaviors. So with that, I've been at Oura for 5 years. I've actually ran every part of the business you possibly think of. Today, I run our product development and delivery organization, including all of our supply chain and operations. So that's it.
Very cool. Excellent. And last but not least, we have Corinne Bain, and you are in product development. But you came from Thrive Global, which is also very, very interesting, founded by Arianna Huffington. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about you and your company.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Corinne Bain. I'm a senior product manager at a company called Lark Technologies, otherwise known as Lark Health. I'm a graduate of Harvard, and after I graduated from Harvard, I started working directly for Arianna Huffington, which was definitely a catapulted me into learning everything about business from the start of my career, from someone who's super powerful in the world of business. And at the time, I actually interned for her at Huffington Post, but I knew that I wanted to get into health and wellness. I read her book Thrive when I was an undergrad. And as a collegiate athlete, it totally resonated with me. I know the impact it makes when you take care of yourself, sleep well, eat well, on your productivity, and at the time, my academic performance. So she had left Huffington Post and sold it to AOL and moved on to start Thrive Global, which was the first company that I worked for under her as a full-time employee. And I was in a bit of like a research manager position at the time and really wanted to get into product from an early age. But I spent some time working on her team. Most CEOs of her caliber have a management team, if you all didn't know that. And I actually was able to sit with our engineering team, went over to their side of the office at the time in New York and said, I want to do something over here, but my degree is in psychology. And they said to me, you should be a product manager. So I quickly pursued that role. And Ariana actually is the reason that I got into product. She believed in me and moved me out to San Francisco to work for our chief product officer at the time, who basically taught me everything I know about product. Her name is Yardley. She's a big deal in the Bay Area in product. She started Women in Product. For those of you who don't know that organization, it's amazing. I highly recommend joining it. And that was the beginning of my product career. I've since been in product for about 6 years. And after my time at Thrive, I transitioned to Lark. And the reason that I wanted to move on was to work in a more clinical space. Thrive is a little bit more corporate wellness related. So I knew I wanted to do something clinical. I, like you, Michael, wanted to be a pediatrician when I was little. So I also have had a sort of innate interest in medicine. My husband's actually an emergency medicine doctor, so it's just kind of in my blood. And now I work on clinical program development for people with chronic conditions, but I can speak more to that later.
Thank you very much. So we're going to jump into the content. We're seeing a lot of sort of the trend of AI, use of more wearables. Everybody's gotten used to it, online services by physicians, all of that. How do you guys think about the nature of the patient-doctor relationship as we move forward in time? James?
Oh, this is kind of a soapbox of mine. If you look at every other sector of our society and our economy, and there are these beautiful slides over the past even 30 years, we see this enormous improvement in per capita productivity of every one of these sectors, the shopping, travel, banking, even manufacturing. 50 years ago, the assembly lines in Detroit used to have people screwing nuts onto bolts to the tires, and now you go into those assembly lines and it's precision welding robotics. But in healthcare, and I have this slide, 100 years ago, we used to pay a nurse to walk around room to room and take your temperature and a few of your vital signs. And then I have a slide of what we do today, 100 years later, and the only thing that's changed is it's a digital thermometer instead of a mercury thermometer. Well, that's a sad statement, and Dr. Emanuel wrote just a brilliant editorial in the Wall Street Journal, I guess 2 years ago now. And it's all about the fact that healthcare is the only sector of our economy, other than education, that has not really truly installed technology to be able to automate what's otherwise manual processes, labor-intensive manual processes. And if you look at healthcare today, $3.4 trillion of spend, 71% of that spend is labor, and we just can't afford it anymore. So when you see that we have a shortage of healthcare professionals and nurses, and now the costs are skyrocketing, what you're seeing is now a very rapid adoption, long overdue, of technology that can help us actually take better care of our patients than we ever did before. Now, what we have to be careful of is the hysteria that's being created by this phrase, artificial intelligence. Ooh, scary. The problem is artificial intelligence really isn't anything artificial, but it scares patients when you say, oh, artificial intelligence is going to take care of you. The truth is, if you ask anybody in this room, how many of you have ever been on an airplane? Most of us will raise our hands. Let's see. Yeah. Well, it turns out if you've been on an airplane for the last 30 years, when you look up right now and you see a plane flying over, who's flying it? Is it the pilot or the co-pilot? And the answer is neither, yeah. It's the autopilot. And you know what? That autopilot is doing a really good job of flying that plane. In fact, better than the old days where you had 3 people in the cockpit trying to pay attention to 900 gauges and dials and doing as best they could humanly. But human cognitive capacity to be able to process large amounts of information in a short period of time has a very significant limitation. So that's why we shouldn't talk about it in terms of artificial intelligence. These are tools that help clinicians, doctors, and nurses to take better care of you by having better information at our fingertips. So AI has a tremendous immediate benefit in helping us take better care of our patients. And the example of what we're doing is literally this little device, which is a sticker, but this is different than your consumer wearable. This is a 510K Class 2 medical device that's measuring your vital signs with the clinical accuracy of the devices in the intensive care unit. But now we could put this sticker on every patient across the hospital outside of the ICU, so now we don't have to pay the nurses to walk around room to room to make a meager amount of measurements on a very intermittent basis. So now we have continuous data. It's measuring minute to minute, hour to hour, 1,200 or 1,400 measurements per day. But you have to realize clinicians don't have the time to pay attention to all this new data. So that's where, stop calling it AI. It's just algorithms. It's math. Let the computer watch that data and then tell us, out of 300 patients in this hospital, here are the 10 that are heading in the wrong direction that need the nurse to go and look at them and spend more time. That's called exception management. So this is now, just in the past year, we've got 300 million data sets on patients that we've never, ever had that kind of insight. So now we run that into machine learning tools, and we're seeing early deterioration, both in the hospital and at home, that you could have never known before, and be able to head off trips to the emergency room and hospitals and so forth. So it's really, really exciting. But what we have to do is help patients and families understand that this is going to help the doctors and nurses take better care of them. It's not replacing, and it's not a robot. It's just smarter care. So it's a really, really exciting time, and I think that we're going to look back on this decade with great interest as being one of the most profound moments in the history of healthcare, because we're finally breaking through what's traditionally a century of basically manual information processing.
Any other comments on patient-doctor relationship and trends?
I'll jump in, actually, probably with using a couple examples, personal ones, actually. So it took me and my wife about 2.5 years to get pregnant. And through that journey, it was emotionally, physically challenging. I mean, we saw chemical miscarriages, so you could basically, you get excited, and then all of a sudden you have that ultimate low. What happened, though, was something pretty magical. we actually found out we were pregnant with Oura before we actually were able to get tested. And so you can imagine, after 2.5 years of going through a lot of different studies and treatments, when we started to see the signal, we immediately said, all right, we need to come home. We need to stop working late. We're going to decompress. We're going to create the most amazing, stress-free environment that we possibly can to increase the probability of success. And thankfully, 2 weeks later, we were able to confirm that. And I bring that up because I think there's this amazing opportunity and this amazing point in our world right now where we're seeing this convergence of amazing devices, amazing technology, amazing algorithms that are able to do these predictions. And this is where the world is headed. And I'll fast forward because something happened after the birth of our child. We actually found out that my wife had breast cancer. And in that moment, your whole life collapses. And the one thing that we did was immediately started, okay, we got chemo, radiation, surgery. I'm happy to announce that after 2.5 years, she's cancer-free. Thank you. But it was actually the use. Every single day, I would wake up and the first thing I would do is I'd look at her Oura data. And every day we would be looking at it from when is the day she's going to be well enough and have the strength enough to go out and do something as simple as a walk down the street. And I see this as an amazing opportunity of us to be able to have future oncologists in the world who are able to see their cancer patients and say, you know what, maybe rest one more day. Or, hey, you're actually doing really well. Maybe we want to do this additional treatment. Like, there's so much. I think you start to empower all of us to take ownership and have a little bit more empowerment there of what's going on. But it also informs our doctors, right? There's an opportunity there for this convergence. And I'm seeing it personally. And I hope that, our dream is to continue to make that happen and build the bridge there.
There's a tremendous amount of trust in the technology, but then also the doctor has to trust in the information you bring them. So those are amazing stories that you've told, Jeff.
Well, on the topic of the doctor trusting the technology, a lot of this we're also getting at is the patient's opportunity to be autonomous in many domains of their health that the traditional doctors, especially the allopaths, the MDs, have never really gone into great detail into. And if you think about what's driving all this chronic diseases that we just talked about, it's lifestyle. It's like diet and like a sedentary lifestyle and some of these other factors, which doctors are not super well equipped to talk to you about nutrition or different ways to take care of your body. When's the last time you had an extensive conversation with your doctor about sleep hygiene, as opposed to here are the interventions we can give you now that you have full-blown insomnia? It's gotten to that point. So I think with consumer health technologies, diagnostics, as well as the layers of AI, that it can actually help, in some ways, the patient self-manage the things that, candidly, our traditional Western healthcare system is not good at managing. And it's through those insights, and it's through eventually, hopefully, behavior change might be one of the biggest things we could do to actually stave off and course correct all this chronic disease that's hitting us. Imagine nutrition trackers, ways that you can track your activity and exercise. And how it might shape the doctor-patient relationship. It could be, I would hope that over time, doctors will also focus more on these areas. Realistically, it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. And so these areas are going to increasingly be put into the hands of the patient to figure out on their own. But with these tools and technologies, they can do a better job at that.
The last thing I'll add to this is, I don't know about all of you, but there's a pretty large communication gap between physicians and patients. Sometimes when doctors are talking about what is going on with their patient, we all look at them with a blank stare because they have their own language. And one of the programs we created at Lark was a heart health program for people at risk of having a heart attack in the next 10 years of their lives. And a big part of it was just education about what's cholesterol, what are your varying types of cholesterol, what does that mean for you if one is high, one is low, and what can you do? So it's all a sense of education and empowerment, but it's also so that the patient can go in and talk to their doctor about something that they would have otherwise probably not really known what the meaning was. So it's really narrowing down the language to be understandable and accessible for people across the U.S. that otherwise probably wouldn't know what a lot of those things mean.
And so you all touched upon the idea of delivering a technology that is, really meeting the patient in their daily lives. And that, really requires high quality, obviously, in order to create that trust. But now we have to talk about the cost equation. That was also brought up with the Jenny and Tom bot. And so can you guys comment on how the companies think about the cost, quality, meeting patients, all of that balancing act, the juggling of all those components?
Yeah, it's interesting. 20 years ago, I'm dating myself, I was the CEO of one of the two largest home blood pressure meter companies in the world. It's called Microlife. It's Omron is kind of the other vendor, and it was so interesting. We sold all of our products through CVS and Walgreens and Walmart during those days, and consumers will pay, at that time $500, $700 for their iPhone, but and you've got 60% of the population in the United States that has high blood pressure. And the American Heart Association guidelines are very clear. If you measure your blood pressure on a weekly basis, your risk of heart attack and stroke were actually 30% lower. And a good doctor would tell you should get a blood pressure meter and measure that at home and make sure your blood pressure medication is working. Only 7% of the hypertensive population in the United States would pull $40 out of their pocket to pay for an over-the-counter, highly accurate consumer blood pressure meter. And so there are categories where people expect their insurance plan to pay for a glucose meter or a blood pressure meter. And we should talk about pulse oximeters, because that turned out to blow up in our face during COVID, where for whatever reason, right now, the FDA does not regulate pulse oximeters that are sold in the retail channel. So you've got pulse oximeters out there that have had no clinical validation, no accuracy assurance, and even doctors saying, hey, during COVID, you might want to get a pulse oximeter because you've got lung disease. And people not unknowingly had a device that had no ability to actually measure that. It was a consumer product. And so medical grade matters. And then over the counter, I'm actually chairing, I've been on the executive board of the Consumer Technology Association for the past 13 years. And that's everybody ever been to the madness of CES? 200,000 of your closest friends in Vegas, always the first week of January. But it's been a tremendous education about the standards that are out there for consumer products. As an example, when we first started this group back in 2013, that was the beginning of the explosion of all the wearables, right? Our Fitbits and our Garmins, and actually Microsoft had a wearable, Samsung, you name it. Well, we started working with, I was at Qualcomm at the time, we started working with United Healthcare in developing a new health plan design that could actually earn you $150 per month, over $1,500 a year discount, not just a discount, but cash into your health savings account if you did a certain level of activity with your wearable every day. But then somebody said, wait a minute, if I wear a Fitbit, I get 9,000 steps. If I wear a Garmin, I get 12,000 steps. So there is no standard for even step counters. So we, CTA, actually have embarked on building out standards for consumer products and saying, hey, this is how a step should be measured across all products. Same thing with sleep. Same thing with, a lot of these consumer products, they don't have the rigor of FDA validation or safety testing and crush testing and heat testing, but yet consumers are buying them. And just give you a heads up, this pulse oximetry thing has become a big deal because of the racial disparities, and finding out that pulse oximeters weren't working in darker skinned individuals during COVID, and that many people probably died both in the hospital and at home because of the lack of clinical validation. So we have to do a better job of helping educate consumers who are rightfully taking ownership of their care and being able to leverage these great products, but consumers can't discriminate really very well about what data is coming from those devices, and the FDA kind of washes their hands if there's not a medical claim. So we're trying to deal with that challenge right now with CTA, and there's a lot of collaboration, cross-pollination with medical professional societies, government agencies, and then the consumer products company. I think, are you guys on the CTA board with us? You need to be.
Yeah, we should be.
All right.
Let's talk.
All right, let's talk.
One thing, we're talking about convenience. I feel like, some of the other folks in this panel may have better things to add to that. I think passive device monitoring is so much more convenient than actually having to take a blood pressure cuff, write down the measurement. So I think the fact that it's automated in these devices is great. But speaking of quality, when I think of quality, it really comes down to 3 pillars, or it's objective measures of whether an intervention might be useful. Let's talk about interventions as opposed to diagnostics. Cost, side effects, effectiveness, right? Those are the 3 domains generally that I tend to think about in buckets. And unfortunately, you don't have good information on all those buckets to make objective comparisons across the board. That's what we would do in an ideal universe. And I have a very kind of contrarian view of this, which is the entire wellness space, especially in a country like America, offers a tremendous opportunity for innovation of products that are generally low cost, have potentially generally very little side effects. And if we just figure out the effectiveness of what these things do, they can become, very bona fide solutions that may potentially be good alternatives to what we're currently doing under a kind of FDA-approved treatment paradigm. And if you think about from the perspective of a payer, whether it's Medicare or an insurance company, if you had the right evidence, you would totally reimburse for tons of wellness products. Maybe you needed enough evidence to know that I'm going to reimburse for an Oura ring because I see this trend, and those who have Oura rings are much less likely to develop insomnia and have escalation of care, or maybe because they're sleeping better, they're less likely to have a mood disorder and then need to go escalate care. So we really got to find that data layer, and it's that data layer that can kind of enable us to make an objective apples-to-apples comparison on this notion of quality. And I think what's also really interesting about the wave of consumer health technologies, it's easier than ever to actually get to that data layer. So it's not just pharma drugs and certain med devices that have the budgets to go get this clinical validation, that there's other ways to collect it. This is also very intrinsically related to the notion of real world data, which is becoming very interesting as well. And so where kind of where it intersects with us is this is why we're so focused on being able to take, primarily right now we're focused on foods and supplements, but allow them to clinically prove what their effects are. And these are products that are never going to be patented, they're never going to be expensive, and you don't even need to go to a doctor, get a prescription, go to a pharmacy, get it filled, copay, all these things. And let's not forget that nearly half of all FDA-approved small drugs were first discovered in plants. And we're lucky here in America that you can bring a botanical product to market without having to go through 10 years of an FDA approval cycle. So there's an interesting opportunity where we can go back to these original plants that a lot of these pharma drugs were derived from, and with all this new opportunities and technology, validate what they do. These become affordable medicines that don't even require the healthcare system to deliver. So that's all I have to share.
Any other comments regarding?
I would maybe just one quick one. We're not a medical device, but we do focus on how do we get medical grade sensing and capabilities out to the masses. And the reason for that is what we're looking to do is if you look at the cost measure, we're trying to get to the point where people don't need to actually use healthcare, right? Now that's a really big aspirational dream. I mean, if you think about it, $4.5 trillion spent in U.S. healthcare, right? It's 17% of our GDP, $13,500 per person. I don't know about you, but I don't use $13,500 a year in healthcare. And I hope I never have to, right? And I think that's the goal: is how do we give people the agency to actually see and understand what's going on physiologically within themselves on a continuous basis. And I think that's the critical part, is it's continuous. So you start to see the variability from day to day, what may be shifting and changing over time. And I think that could be an element that helps inform our medical system, our practitioners to, and obviously they're going to be the trusted ones to help guide us in the right direction. But our goal is to never have to get there. We want to be proactive, right? And I think by doing that, we can help offset some of those costs, because people will be seeing those things before they ever get there in the need of it. The other one is remote patient care. I think if wearables start to get more involved with that, as you're starting to see here, you're starting to reduce the healthcare costs again, because people are not having to go to the doctors or in the hospitals all the time. So that's two. And then the third one I would say is the disparity component of it. There's a lot of regions where in our country, healthcare is unaffordable. And then there's also another element, which is, I hate to say it, women do not get the treatments and the equality that they deserve. And so by empowering them with tools and across the board, it allows the conversation to shift. It gives the discussion that happens in the doctor's room a little bit different notation. And so if we can do all those three things, right, I think you're going to see a better world. And that's really what we're hoping to unlock and enable.
So I love both of your comments hinted at, real world data, mining of the data, value-based care, and shifting of sort of some of the shifting the incentives and shifting the power so that you can better kind of push cost of care and buckets of care into different places that were never traditionally there. For example, employers, imagine I'm sure you do, talk with employers around the Oura ring and say, hey, I'm really healthy, lower my, lower this population's, insurance, risk profile, exactly. Or life insurance. I remember investing in a company where they brought a health economic value proposition to invest in, to use their technology by saying, hey, these people are gonna, prolong their lives. So those buckets are very, very important. We're shifting that kind of, and being more optimal about the patient populations where you direct care.
Yeah, you couldn't be more right. This is the decade of data-driven care, and even when you talk about insurability, like I said, we worked with United, I think it's 9 years ago now, to develop a completely. It was the first plan design that was 100% predicated on data from a consumer wearable. And having that data, just like if how many of you have had a life insurance policy and they send somebody to the house and they get one sample of information, 20-minute visit by a nurse, and then they go back to the actuary and say, hey, I got a little snapshot. Tell me how long this guy is going to live and how we should price his insurance plan. And, it's just like throwing a dart. But now, think of the data from a wearable for a month that can see how you move, how you sleep, how you breathe, what your temperature is doing. There's so much insight. It's all about signal. And then you give that to an actuary, and the actuary can know a hell of a lot more about what this person's risk profile is. And so everything we do from insurability, and then being able to actually earn your way, just like if you're a safe driver and you're willing to put one of those little things in your car and you don't race off the stoplight and you don't come to hard brakes. I've got 5 kids. I've gone through this with 4 out of 5 teenagers so far. You get a discount on your insurance plan, and we should be able to do that more and more now, and for the insurers across the board to be able to basically have a smarter risk profile based on this data. But it's a big deal balancing all of that with all of the privacy issues. We haven't talked about that, but privacy and sharing all this information about you, it's the whole, I want it both ways. I want that discount, but I don't want everybody knowing, where I was last night. Because it looks like you were at the bar last night until 4 a.m. and we can see that from your GPS tracker. Really. And so it's an interesting dynamic that we're all going through in our society today with this quantified self and all of this rich new information and how it can be used to our benefit, but also, being worried about how that information can be used against us, because our sensor, we can actually monitor what's called continine. Continine is the metabolite of nicotine, and so we can tell if you've been smoking in the last 24 hours. We have an alcohol sensor that can tell within 10 minutes if you drank a beer. Right? So if you talk about somebody that wants a $10 million life insurance policy, you send a nurse to the house, you can stop smoking for a few days so it doesn't show up in your urine test or your alcohol. But let's wear one of these little puppies for a month if you really want a discount on your life insurance, and then we'll see how much your risk profile looks like. It's a wild, think about the dynamics that we're all dealing with here. But it's got huge potential, but we have not wrestled these issues to the ground.
One thing that's a corollary to that, something that's super fascinating, and I think about like the incentives for insurance providers to reimburse for preventative behavior, preventative interventions, and actually the economics are not fully aligned there. And so I feel like there's some business opportunity there, right? Because your average insurance company may only be with the patient for a few years. But are they going to spend all this money getting you healthy, optimizing your diet, the food is medicine movement, literally sending food to people's homes to stave off chronic disease? They're not reaping the benefits. If we were a single payer system, then it would make sense. But what happens when you're fragmented and you're moving between insurance companies? So there's probably some regulatory reform that could happen. There's probably also some business models. I'm really shooting from the hips here of like how you could create a way where these like savings and preventions could still be carried through and benefit future like insurers that you work with. There's something there to look into. But right now the economics are not that aligned, which is why for insurance companies, they'll do a little bit to prevent stuff, but really like long-term chronic diseases, it's not economically, it doesn't make sense for them to focus on that. They'll do things to like prevent you from getting flu next season because you might end up in the hospital and it's a massive bill they have to pay.
New company idea.
Yeah, someone in this room.
We're going to move to the tough stuff. Patent disputes. There's been some news on Massimo and Apple Health having some struggling patent issues. Anybody care to comment, Corinne or others?
I'm happy to speak to the product development process and how we address the ever-changing clinical and legal regulatory standards. So when we're thinking of a new feature or product line or program, we are very, very strict about often and always checking with our legal and clinical teams about what the newest regulatory standards are. We have in-house legal and clinical teams, and they're always, I like to think they like me, but I think in product, you're often sort of pushing the bounds of what you want to be doing because that's how you're innovative. But at the same time, they're creating these boundaries because ultimately we have to be HIPAA compliant and respect our patients. So we go through, as part of the product development process, a very strict review of the legal and clinical regulatory standards. And that's how we address this risk. But that's obviously from an internal experience. So I'm curious to hear, too, with devices also, how you all address that.
Yeah, it's this is well. I have a photo I can show sometime. I was the chief medical officer of Qualcomm, and then David Rue was chief medical officer of Samsung, and then Mike O'Reilly was chief medical officer of Apple. And we always get together for dinner every year at CES, and at that dinner, Apple was suing Qualcomm was suing Samsung, and Samsung was suing Apple, and it was quite an interesting evening. But being at Qualcomm for 5 years was an amazing education around IP. That entire $100 billion, I guess it's about $130 billion market cap is all predicated on a massive IP portfolio, and they really pioneered. Not to take too much credit away from Steve Jobs, but the iPhone doesn't exist without Qualcomm, and it pretty much still doesn't exist, and it's all on that IP portfolio. And when you look at the pharmaceutical industry, it's all predicated on being able to protect that drug molecule that took billions of dollars to bring. What's really interesting now is how many of you have heard of something called SAMD? SAMD. Okay. This is a brand new, in the last few years, exploding new category in the FDA. It's called software as a medical device. What is it? It's AI. How do you develop an algorithm and commercialize it and protect it, but take it through FDA so that it actually has a medical claim? So this is a new vehicle that allows you to take your algorithm through the FDA without disclosing the algorithm itself. Because if you tell everybody the Coca-Cola recipe, then everybody knows how to make Coca-Cola. So that was one of the most highly guarded secrets. So trade secrets are hard to protect. And so you don't want to disclose this amazing machine learning algorithm that's now going to save millions of lives or help cancer patients. So the FDA has created a vehicle called SAMDA. You should, if you're interested in doing things in healthcare related to AI, you should know about this. And what you have to do is say, here are the perfunctory required data inputs to power your black box algorithm, and then here are the outputs and the basically clinical claims of your algorithm, and then you have to do safety testing at an FDA level, and you have to show basically the outcome benefit of that algorithm. So you're going to see, and there's a whole AI section now in the FDA because everybody's taking this very seriously, and there's a lot of concern about what we call self-learning algorithms. What if that algorithm keeps getting more and more data every month and every year, and so with more data, I can make this algorithm even smarter and smarter? That's where it starts to get people nervous, because if the algorithm changed, how do I know that the safety hasn't changed or the beneficial outcomes haven't changed? So there's a lot of hand-wringing, but it's fun. This whole era right now of wearables and data and machine learning, again, like I said, we're going to look back on this decade and go, whoa, big things happened, and it's an exciting time. The key is we have to figure out how to take better care of more people at a fraction of the cost, because what we're doing right now is absolutely unsustainable, and we're about to come off a cliff by the end of this decade in our healthcare economics. So innovation is our only hope of being able to accomplish this.
I think Michael is wanting to make a comment.
Yeah, I know we're getting close to time, so I'll just make it quick. How many people before this lawsuit even knew who Massimo was? And the interesting part is they're a $7 billion company. Apple, close to $3 trillion. The thing that we've been following this closely, and the thing that I respect the most right now is the patent system is working. right? This is what it was intended to do, is to have a company that's able to be a smaller size, be able to defend the innovations that they have. Both Apple and Massimo, both amazing innovators, right? And I think, to your point, there's only more and more innovation right now going on. And so if any of you are working at companies, if any of you are starting your own company, I really encourage you to think about your patent portfolio. It's becoming more and more important as time goes on, because not just for the US, but geographically, where do you actually put your patents and lay your ground? So it is becoming something that is, more and more important. The other thing I would note is it's also become a currency. To your point, like, they're all suing each other, but then in a lot of cases they'll settle because one of them is probably infringing upon the others. So this is it is something. It's a different world, but yeah, it's something we closely, and we for the last 10 years have been patenting significantly around health and around the ring form factor.
Thank you. So in the last 5 minutes, I'm going to do a rapid fire, sort of, with an explanation. So there are VCs in the room, there are a lot of students in the room, so I'm going to ask you 2 questions and would love you guys to say what your favorite company is besides your own, and what advice would you give to students as they graduate and kind of go off into the ether and get into healthcare. So favorite company and why, and then the one piece of advice. Starting from Corinne, is that okay?
Sure. Can I ask a clarifying question? Is it favorite healthcare consumer tech company? Okay. I'm not trying to suck up to you. But Oura is truly the only device that I have used on the healthcare spectrum, other than my steps on Apple Health Kit, that has taught me something new. And I can actually change my behavior based on it. So thank you for what you do. I test all kinds of products. I'll make this quick. I know this is rapid fire. And because I think that's what makes a good product manager. But I'm super picky. So Oura, and then TIA is a women's health clinic, which is very cool. You should check it out if you haven't, for all the women out there. Advice, I would say healthcare, consumer health tech is very vast. So thinking about what problem you want to solve, is it a specific disease state, is it medical devices, is it women's health, etc., is really helpful for then targeting which companies are out there tackling it. Luckily, there's a lot out there, but it can be overwhelming when you're looking and interviewing. So I would recommend picking your problem area and then going for that. And then try as many products in healthcare as possible, because there's nothing better than knowing how it feels as a user when you go and work for the company.
Thank you. Nobody was paid on that. Actually, the one, it's not necessarily a company, but I would say it's a technology that a lot of companies have, which is continuous glucose monitors. I hope that they get better, because I do not like getting poked with them. But I mention it because I think there's diabetes and prediabetes is plaguing the world right now, and a lot of people actually have it and are getting to that point and don't necessarily even know they are. One of the things that I've noticed, and I've used a few of them, and one of the best parts is you can actually start to see how different foods impact your glucose, not just what the food is, but also the sequencing of when you eat or drink. And how you can actually manage that. And so for me, it was an eye-opening experience to really understand, and then even recommend everybody walk 15-20 minutes after you eat. Just do it. Your body will really love you for it in the long term. In terms of what I'd recommend, I call it MPI. What matters to you? What problem are you trying to solve? And what impact do you want to make? And why I bring it up is what matters. Is it the pay, the salary? Are you driven by a mission? Problem. What problem are you trying to solve? This world of health is massive. Which sliver do you want to attack, or do you want to go bigger? What impact do you want to make? Is it local? Is it global? What is it on those 3 areas? And why I bring it up is if you answer those 3 questions, it'll help you start to identify where do you actually go. not just which company, but what size of company. Do you want to be in a startup? You're going to have more opportunity to grow your career. You're probably going to have a lot more influence. But guess what? The risk is a lot higher. As you go down the path and you get into a larger corporation, the risk is lower. You get nice, comfortable salaries, but the change in the influence you may have may be different. And so that's the area that I would kind of look at, is the stage of the company. I'd look at what industry, so pick out which sliver you want to tackle. And then the other part I would say is, once you identify that, find companies that fit within that. And if you have time, start making relationships with people in the company. And that way you start to learn about the culture, which is also extremely important.
They took both of mine. First I was going to say Oura. I can't see that. Then I was going to say continuous glucose monitoring. And not even just for diabetics and pre-diabetics, but if you think about, again, one of the main drivers of chronic disease right now is metabolism dysregulation, blood sugar dysregulation, and then being overweight or all the way to obesity. And that drives higher cancer risk, cardiovascular disease, dementia, all these things. Where is it coming from? There's way too much sugar hitting our system. And I don't even mean sugar in terms of glucose. Like carbohydrates break down into sugar just slightly slower than glucose. And the way that you can find that out is continuous glucose monitor. It's not the best experience yet. I hope it gets better. And if there's one book you want to read on this, it's Glucose Goddess. It's a great read, super short, and yeah, sequencing, all these things matter. And not just for your metabolic health, but it's probably driving inflammation, it's driving aging. Every time you have a blood sugar spike in your bloodstream, and also your energy levels are going to fluctuate. So the better you manage your blood sugar, the better consistent energy levels you'll have. You won't have crashes, all these things. And then advice. So you guys were giving kind of like career advice. I'll just give more like broader, like what industry do you want to be in? Do you want to be in healthcare, where it's regulated by the FDA, the claims are regulated, you need to convince doctors to prescribe things, you need insurance companies to reimburse for it for something to really get traction. And that's totally fine. Those models have really nice barriers to entry once you can penetrate that. Do you want to be in the wellness space, where the pace of innovation is tremendous? You're not really going to get doctors to be evangelists for your product. Insurance reimbursement is very tough. And D2C marketing can be often competitive, but man, you can go to market, you can innovate, you can do crazy things. So you mentioned this coming era of data. Super agree with that. It's also, I think, the era of wellness. And there's this awesome McKinsey report that came out 2 weeks ago, really defining the trends that are happening for wellness. So you may want to check it out. It's a free read. It'll be really interesting and insightful. But again, the opportunity here is 30 years ago, how does like a patient that's concerned about their health find out about a wellness product? Like, it just doesn't exist. They go to the doctor, hey doc, what do I do? Take this pill. Great. So you're in an era where consumers have access and knowledge of information like the way they never had before to learn about your wellness offering or service. And we are blessed that in this country, there are ways that you can make health statements. As long as they're not a disease claim, you can make health statements, as long as you have the competent, reliable scientific evidence to back up that statement. So you could have a product that it's not that it's clinically proven for treating your insomnia. Insomnia is a disease. It's clinically proven to give you better sleep. I can make that claim, and I don't have to deal with any regulators to make that claim, as long as I have data, the competent, reliable scientific evidence that my product is indeed helping someone sleep. And to get that evidence is easier than ever before. So yeah, decide where you want to be in this health arena, and especially the unique opportunities here in the U.S.
All right, I guess I have 30 seconds. Sitting on the CTA board, it would be like choosing between my children, and I don't want to be on record of naming names. But just as I said earlier, anything is in healthcare that's generating new rich signal from patients or consumers, and or able to do really exciting things with all that data to create better insights and clinical intelligence. And my advice for all of you business school types, from someone who went through 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, and 9 years of surgical training at Duke, and then became a cardiothoracic surgeon and stopped operating 22 years ago to be an entrepreneur. Started 4 companies. This is my 5th. I raised $500 million in working capital, taken 2 of the companies public, and then one was acquired by Qualcomm and the other got gobbled up by Microsoft. So the advice from all of that is have a vision for your idea. Be able to articulate that very, very cleanly. You have to be persuasive because you have to be able to raise capital in order to support that idea. The idea goes nowhere if you don't have the funding to bring it to fruition. But don't do it for the money. You have to do it for the benefit that you believe in. And if you get that right and you show the clinical benefit and you help people, the money follows. Don't give up. And what you think is the right idea will zig and zag in order to get to the end point. And then it's this resilience. You will fail, you'll come right to the brink of being out of money, and you won't know how to pay the bills, and then you figure it out and you just keep going. It's that tenacity that you see in all entrepreneurs, and that conviction that you heard in the previous group. So it's just the most exciting time to be an entrepreneur in healthcare, and our society desperately needs those entrepreneurs because, like I said, it's the only hope we have to being able to innovate our way to surviving economically. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was excellent.